I watched through my frosted kitchen window as Patricia Hammond's silver Lexus pulled up to my driveway, and I knew exactly what was coming before she even stepped out of her car. The president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association had that look on her face, the one where her lips were pressed so thin they practically disappeared, and her shoulders were squared like she was marching into battle. I had been living in this neighborhood in Bozeman, Montana, for 5 years, and I had learned to recognize that expression from a mile away. My name is Gabriel Jennings, and I had just finished my morning coffee when Patricia's insistent knocking started rattling my front door. I took my time walking over, deliberately slow, because I knew whatever she wanted was going to irritate me regardless of how quickly I answered. When I finally opened the door, the cold January air hit me like a slap, and Patricia was already mid-sentence before I could even say hello. "Mr. Jennings, we need to discuss your tractor situation immediately," she said, her breath creating little clouds in the frigid air. She was wearing a puffy North Face jacket that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, and her perfectly manicured hand was clutching a manila folder that I assumed contained whatever nonsense she was about to throw at me. "Good morning to you too, Patricia," I said, not bothering to hide my sarcasm. "What tractor situation would that be? Don't play dumb with me. You know exactly what I am talking about, that monstrosity you have been using to clear snow from your driveway and the street." She thrust the folder toward me, and I reluctantly took it, flipping it open to find several printed photos of my John Deere tractor with the snow plow attachment I had installed last month. "That monstrosity is how I keep my property accessible during winter," I said. "In case you have not noticed, we get about 300 inches of snow a year up here. The HOA board held an emergency meeting last night, and we have determined that your tractor violates several community guidelines. Specifically, Section 8.4 regarding acceptable vehicles for street maintenance and Section 12.2 regarding visual aesthetics and property values." I stared at her, genuinely confused for a moment. "Patricia, I use it to plow snow. Half the people on this street have been thanking me because I clear the whole cul-de-sac when I do my driveway. Nobody has complained." "Well, the board has complaints. That tractor is an eyesore, it is too loud, and frankly, street maintenance is not your responsibility. We have contracted services for that. The contracted services you are talking about show up maybe twice a week if we are lucky. I have a job, Patricia. I need to be able to get out of my driveway when I need to leave, not wait around for some plow that might show up eventually." She pulled another piece of paper from her jacket pocket, this one looking more official. "This is a cease and desist order from the HOA. Effective immediately, you are no longer permitted to operate that tractor on any HOA-managed property, which includes the streets, sidewalks, and any common areas. If you continue to do so, you will be fined $500 per incident, and we will take legal action if necessary." I felt my jaw clench. "You have got to be kidding me." "I am completely serious. The board voted unanimously. You have been warned, Mr. Jennings. If we see that tractor out here again, there will be consequences." She turned on her heel and walked back to her Lexus, leaving me standing in my doorway holding a folder full of photos of my own property. I went back inside and immediately called my buddy Derek, who lived 3 streets over. Derek was a lawyer, though not the kind who dealt with HOA nonsense regularly. When he answered, I could hear his kids screaming in the background. "Gabriel, what's up?" he said, sounding harried. "Patricia just served me with a cease and desist. Apparently, I cannot use my tractor to plow snow anymore." There was a pause, and then Derek laughed. "Are you serious right now?" "Dead serious. She has photos and everything. says it violates community guidelines. Did you sign anything when you bought the house acknowledging these specific rules? I signed the HOA agreement. Yeah. Standard stuff. But Derek, there is nothing in there about what kind of equipment I can use for snow removal on my own property. Streets are not technically your property, man. That is the loophole they are using. Look, I can review your HOA agreement if you want, but honestly, fighting this could cost you more in legal fees than it is worth. These HOAs have entire legal funds set up exactly for this kind of thing. So what? I just let them tell me I cannot clear my own driveway. You can clear your driveway. You just cannot use the tractor on the street. Get a regular snow blower or something. I thanked Derek and hung up, frustrated. The problem was, a regular snow blower was not going to cut it. My driveway was a quarter-mile long, and during heavy snowfall, I could get 3 or 4 feet of accumulation overnight. The tractor was not just convenient, it was necessary. But I also was not interested in racking up $500 fines every time it snowed. The weather forecast that evening was calling for a major winter storm. I am talking about the kind of storm that shuts down highways and leaves people stranded. The meteorologist on the local news said we could expect anywhere from 2 to 4 feet of snow over a 72-hour period, with high winds creating drifts up to 8 feet in some areas. They were advising people to stock up on supplies and avoid unnecessary travel. I went to the grocery store that night and loaded up on food, batteries, and firewood. While I was there, I ran into my neighbor Jim, who lived 2 houses down from me. Jim was retired military, a good guy who kept to himself mostly. "Hell of a storm coming," Jim said, loading cases of water into his cart. "You ready for it?" "As ready as I will ever be," I said. "Hey, did you hear about the HOA banning my tractor?" Jim's expression darkened. "Patricia mentioned something about it at the board meeting." I was not there, but my wife told me. "That is complete garbage, Gabriel. You have been doing everyone a favor." Well, apparently the board does not see it that way. The board is just Patricia and her cronies. Linda Marshall and Susan Chen just go along with whatever Patricia wants because they have nothing better to do. Meanwhile, the rest of us actually have to live with their stupid decisions. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said. "The storm is supposed to hit tomorrow. And I guarantee you that contracted snow service Patricia is so confident in is not going to show up for days. We are going to be buried, and nobody is going to be able to get out." Jim looked at me for a long moment. "You are not going to plow, are you? They told me not to." Who am I to disobey a direct order from the HOA? He actually grinned at that. "This is going to be interesting. Patricia lives at the end of the cul-de-sac. She is going to be completely stuck. That is her problem, not mine. I will clear my own driveway with a shovel if I have to. But the street, that is HOA property, apparently. They can deal with it." The snow started falling around midnight. I woke up at 3 in the morning to check, and there were already 6 inches on the ground. By sunrise, it was close to 18 inches, and the wind was howling so loud it sounded like a freight train. I made coffee and watched through my window as the world turned completely white. The street was invisible under a blanket of snow, and it was still coming down in thick, heavy sheets. My phone started buzzing around 8 in the morning, text messages from neighbors asking if I was going to plow. I sent the same response to everyone. "HOA banned me from using the tractor. Sorry." The responses ranged from confusion to outrage, but I did not elaborate. I had been given a direct order, and I was following it. By noon on the first day, the snow was approaching 3 feet, and the wind had created drifts that were over 6 feet tall in some places. My driveway was completely impassable, but I was not concerned. I had stocked up on everything I needed, and I had a fireplace to keep warm. I could afford to wait it out. The phone calls started around 1 in the afternoon. The first was from Linda Marshall, one of the board members who had voted to ban my tractor. "Gabriel, this is Linda. We need you to come plow the street. Nobody can get out." "I cannot do that, Linda. The HOA banned me from using my tractor on the street. Patricia served me with a cease and desist yesterday." "Well, yes, but this is an emergency situation. Surely you understand that." "What I understand is that I was threatened with $500 fines if I operated my tractor on HOA property. So I am not going to do that. You will need to contact your contracted snow service. We have been trying. They are not answering their phones. They are probably overwhelmed with the storm." That sounds like a problem for the HOA to solve, not me. I was explicitly told that street maintenance is not my responsibility. Linda sputtered for a moment before hanging up. 20 minutes later, Susan Chen called with essentially the same request and got the same answer. Then Jim called, not to ask me to plow, but to tell me that Patricia was apparently having a meltdown because she could not get out of her driveway to go to some appointment she had scheduled. "She is calling everyone on the street, demanding someone come dig her out," Jim said, barely containing his laughter. "I told her I did not own a plow, and she accused me of being uncooperative. This is the best entertainment I have had in years." The snow did not let up. Day 1 turned into day 2, and we picked up another 1.5 feet of accumulation. The entire neighborhood was essentially shut down. People were posting on the community Facebook page, some complaining about being trapped, others expressing frustration with the HOA's decision to ban my tractor. A few people tried to organize a group effort to shovel the street by hand, but quickly realized how futile that was. We were talking about a street that was over 1,000 feet long, buried under 4.5 feet of snow, with drifts that made it even worse. Patricia called me directly on the evening of day 2. I almost did not answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Mr. Jennings, this has gone on long enough. I am ordering you to clear the street immediately." "You are ordering me." "Patricia, you served me with a cease and desist less than 48 hours ago. You threatened me with fines and legal action. What exactly has changed?" "The situation has changed. This is an emergency. People cannot get out. What if someone has a medical emergency?" "Then they should call 911. Emergency services have snowmobiles and specialized vehicles for exactly this kind of situation. But the streets are your responsibility, remember? You made that very clear. You are being incredibly childish about this." "No, I am being compliant." "You told me not to use my tractor on the street. I am following your rules. Is not that what you wanted?" "Everyone following the rules," her voice got shrill. "If you do not clear this street, I will have you fined for every day you refuse." "On what grounds?" "Show me the section of the HOA agreement that says I am required to provide snow removal services." "I will wait." She hung up on me. I made myself dinner and watched a movie, completely unbothered. Outside, the snow continued to fall. Day 3 arrived, and the storm finally started to taper off. We had received a total of 52 inches of snow over the 72-hour period, with drifts reaching heights of 10 feet in some places. The main roads in Bozeman were slowly being cleared by city plows, but side streets and residential neighborhoods were low priority. Our subdivision was completely isolated, and according to the community Facebook page, tempers were running high. Someone had created a poll asking if the HOA should rescind the tractor ban. It was 93% in favor of rescinding it, with only 3 people voting to keep it in place. I assumed those 3 people were Patricia, Linda, and Susan. The comments section was brutal. People were calling the board incompetent, demanding Patricia's resignation, and several homeowners were threatening to sue the HOA for the losses they had incurred from being unable to get to work or keep appointments. My phone rang mid-morning on day 3. It was a number I did not recognize, but I answered anyway. "Is this Gabriel Jennings?" "Yes. Who is this?" "This is Carl Rodriguez from the city's emergency management office. We have received multiple calls from residents in your subdivision reporting that your streets have not been cleared and people are unable to evacuate if necessary. Can you tell me what the situation is?" I explained the entire thing to him, from the HOA ban to Patricia's demands that I clear the street anyway. Carl listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he sighed heavily. "So you are telling me that you have the equipment to clear the streets, but your HOA has banned you from doing so, and now they are upset that the streets are not clear." "That is exactly what I am telling you. And you have this cease and desist order in writing?" "Yes, sir." Patricia Hammond delivered it to me personally the day before the storm hit. "Mr. Jennings, I am going to need you to email me a copy of that document. What the HOA has done here could actually constitute reckless endangerment. If someone had a medical emergency and could not get out because they banned the only person willing and able to clear the streets, they could be held liable." I sent Carl the photos and documents Patricia had given me, and he thanked me before hanging up. An hour later, Patricia called me again, but this time her tone was completely different. She sounded panicked. "Gabriel, I just got a call from emergency management. They are threatening to fine the HOA for creating a dangerous situation. You need to tell them that we did not prevent you from clearing snow." "But you did prevent me. I have it in writing, Patricia. You threatened me with fines and legal action if I used my tractor. That was for aesthetic purposes, not for emergency situations." "That is not what the cease and desist says. It says I am banned from operating the tractor on any HOA-managed property, period. No exceptions were mentioned. Please, Gabriel, I am asking you nicely. We can talk about the tractor ban. Maybe we were too hasty. But right now, we need you to clear the streets before this gets any worse." "I will think about it," I said, and hung up. I did not actually need to think about it. I had made my point, and continuing to leave everyone trapped was not going to accomplish anything productive. But I was not about to let Patricia off the hook completely. I called Derek back and asked him if he could draft a formal agreement for me. "What kind of agreement?" Derek asked. "Something that says the HOA acknowledges I am allowed to use my tractor for snow removal on the streets, and that they will not fine me or take any action against me for doing so. I want it in writing, signed by the board before I plow anything." "I can do that. Give me 20 minutes. Derek emailed me the document and I printed it out. Then I called Patricia back. "I will clear the streets on one condition. You, Linda, and Susan all sign a document acknowledging that I am permitted to use my tractor for snow removal, and that the cease and desist order is null and void. Once I have that signed document, I will start plowing." "Fine. Whatever you want, just bring it over." "No, you come to me. My driveway is still snowed in, remember? You are the one who made it impossible for me to get out." There was a long pause. "How exactly do you expect me to get to your house, Gabriel? I cannot even get out of my own driveway." "Sounds like a personal problem. I guess you should have thought of that before banning my tractor." She made a frustrated noise and hung up. 10 minutes later, Jim called me, laughing so hard he could barely speak. "Patricia just called and asked me to drive her to your house. I told her I cannot get out either because nobody has plowed the street. She is losing her mind." It took Patricia 3 hours to walk from her house to mine. I watched through the window as she struggled through the snow drifts, wearing what looked like designer snow boots that were completely inadequate for the conditions. When she finally reached my door, she was red-faced, sweating despite the cold, and looked absolutely miserable. "Here," she gasped, leaning against the door frame. "Where is the document?" I handed it to her, and she signed it without even reading it properly. Then she called Linda and Susan on a conference call and made them verbally agree to the terms while I recorded the conversation on my phone. Once I had everything documented, I thanked her and closed the door. "Wait, are you not going to start plowing now?" she asked, looking panicked. "Eventually. I need to dig out my own driveway first, which is going to take a while since it has been sitting under 4 feet of snow for 3 days. Then I will get to the street, probably take me most of the afternoon. You said you would plow if I signed, and I will. But Patricia, my tractor is in my garage, which is currently inaccessible. I am going to need a few hours. You are welcome to wait here, or you can walk back home." "Your choice." She chose to walk back home, which gave me a great deal of satisfaction. I spent the next hour clearing enough of my driveway to get the tractor out, and then I fired it up for the first time in 3 days. The engine roared to life, and I started the long process of clearing the street. It took me 6 hours to plow the entire cul-de-sac and the main street leading out of the subdivision. By the time I finished, it was dark, and I was exhausted. But the streets were clear, and people could finally get out. My phone blew up with thank you messages from neighbors, and several people left gift cards and bottles of wine on my porch as appreciation. The next HOA meeting was 2 weeks later, and I attended for the first time in years. The community center was packed with angry homeowners, all demanding answers about the tractor ban and why the board had allowed the situation to get so out of hand. Patricia tried to start the meeting with normal business, but she was immediately shouted down. "We are not talking about anything else until we address what happened during the storm," someone yelled from the back. Patricia looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. "The board acknowledges that our decision regarding Mr. Jennings' tractor was perhaps not well thought out. We have since rescinded the ban, and he is free to continue clearing snow as he has been doing." "Perhaps not well thought out." Jim stood up, his voice booming. "You endangered everyone in this neighborhood because you were more concerned about aesthetics than safety. People could not get to work. Families could not get food. What if someone had a heart attack? What if there had been a fire? We had no way of knowing the storm would be that severe," Linda said weakly. "Everyone knew," another neighbor shouted. "It was all over the news for 3 days before it hit. The only people who did not seem to know were the 3 of you." The meeting devolved into chaos, with multiple people demanding the board's resignation. Patricia tried to maintain control, but it was clear she had lost the room. Eventually, someone made a formal motion to hold a special election for new board members, and it was seconded immediately. The vote was unanimous, with only Patricia, Linda, and Susan abstaining. The special election was held 3 weeks later. Patricia did not even bother running for re-election. Linda and Susan tried, but they were both voted out by landslide margins. The new board was made up of actually reasonable people, including Jim, who became the new president. But the story did not end there. Remember Carl Rodriguez from Emergency Management? Turns out he had not forgotten about the situation. About a month after the storm, I received a call from an investigator with the Montana Department of Justice. They were looking into whether the HOA board had violated any state laws regarding public safety. "Mr. Jennings, we have been reviewing the documentation you provided to emergency management, as well as statements from other residents in your subdivision. We believe there is sufficient evidence that the former HOA board acted in a manner that created a significant risk to public safety. "What does that mean exactly?" I asked. "It means we are considering filing charges against Patricia Hammond, Linda Marshall, and Susan Chen for reckless endangerment. However, we wanted to speak with you first, since you were directly involved." I met with the investigator the following week and gave a complete statement. Several other neighbors did the same, including people who had missed critical medical appointments or lost wages because they could not get out of the subdivision. One family had a child with diabetes, and they had nearly run out of insulin during the 3 days we were snowed in. Another resident had missed chemotherapy treatment. The more the investigator dug, the worse it looked for Patricia and her board. It turned out they had received multiple warnings from the city about ensuring adequate snow removal plans were in place, and they had ignored all of them. They had also failed to verify that the contracted snow service they claimed to have was actually capable of handling major storms. In fact, the company they had contracted with had gone out of business 2 months before the storm, and nobody on the board had bothered to arrange a replacement. 3 months after the storm, Patricia Hammond, Linda Marshall, and Susan Chen were formally charged with reckless endangerment and criminal negligence. The case went to trial the following winter, and I was called as a witness. The prosecution laid out a clear timeline of events, showing how the board had systematically ignored warnings, banned the one person who was actively helping, and then tried to cover up their mistakes when things went wrong. The defense tried to argue that it was just poor judgment, not criminal behavior, but the jury was not buying it. The testimony from the family with the diabetic child was particularly damaging. The mother broke down on the stand describing how terrified she had been that her daughter might die because they could not get to a pharmacy. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Patricia, Linda, and Susan were all found guilty on multiple counts. The judge was not lenient. In his sentencing remarks, he said that people in positions of authority have a responsibility to put safety above aesthetics, and their failure to do so had put an entire community at risk. Patricia was sentenced to 6 months in county jail, with an additional 2 years of probation. Linda and Susan each got 90 days, also with probation. They were also ordered to pay restitution to the families who had suffered financial losses due to the street not being cleared. The HOA's insurance covered most of it, but the 3 of them were still on the hook for tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees and damages. The news coverage was extensive. Local papers ran stories about the case, and it even got picked up by a few national outlets as an example of HOA overreach gone wrong. I gave a couple of interviews, mostly just explaining what had happened and why I had refused to plow during the storm. Some people thought I should have just cleared the streets regardless of the ban, but most people understood that I had been put in an impossible position. The new HOA board, with Jim as president, completely rewrote the community guidelines. They eliminated about half of the unnecessary rules, including anything related to what type of equipment residents could use for property maintenance. They also established an emergency protocol that specifically designated certain residents, including me, as approved for emergency snow removal. I was even reimbursed for fuel and maintenance costs, which was a nice touch. Patricia tried to appeal her conviction, but it was denied. She ended up serving her full 6 months, and when she got out, she moved away from Bozeman entirely. Last I heard, she was living with her sister in Florida, about as far from Montana winters as you can get. Linda and Susan also moved away within a year of their release. I think the embarrassment of the whole thing was too much for them to handle. As for me, life went back to normal. Well, mostly normal. Every winter when the first big snow hits, I fire up my tractor and clear the streets, and every winter my neighbors thank me. The difference now is that I do not have to worry about some power-hungry HOA president threatening me with fines. The community is better for what happened, honestly. The new board actually listens to residents and makes decisions based on common sense rather than petty rules. We still have an HOA, but it functions the way it is supposed to, maintaining common areas, organizing neighborhood events, and handling legitimate issues. Not banning tractors during Montana winters. I kept the cease and desist order that Patricia gave me. It is framed on my wall now, right next to my fireplace. People always ask about it when they visit, and I am happy to tell them the story. It serves as a reminder that sometimes standing your ground and letting people face the consequences of their own bad decisions is the right thing to do. Jim jokes that I should run for the board myself, but I have no interest in that kind of thing. I am happy just being a regular homeowner who helps out his neighbors when he can. Although I did get a new snow plow attachment for the tractor last year, a bigger one, and nobody said a word about it. In fact, the HOA actually thanked me in their newsletter for being willing to help keep the streets clear. The whole experience taught me something important about dealing with unreasonable people in positions of minor authority. Sometimes you cannot fight them directly, because they hold all the cards and they are willing to use them. But you can absolutely let them create their own problems and then refuse to bail them out. Patricia thought she could push me around, threaten me with fines, and that I would just cave and do what she wanted anyway when things got bad. She was wrong. The fact that her actions ended up being criminal was not something I had anticipated, but it was not exactly surprising either. When you make decisions that put people in danger because you care more about appearances than safety, there are consequences. In this case, those consequences included jail time, which seems appropriate given how many people were affected. I sometimes wonder if Patricia learned anything from the experience. Probably not, honestly. People like that rarely do. They always find a way to blame someone else, to justify their actions, to convince themselves they were right all along. But that is not my problem anymore. She is gone. The bad board members are gone, and the neighborhood is better off for it. The story became something of a legend in Bozeman. People still talk about it at the coffee shop downtown, especially when winter rolls around. Remember that HOA that banned the guy with the tractor, and then everyone got snowed in? It has become a cautionary tale about what happens when HOAs overreach, and I am okay with being the main character in that story. Derek, my lawyer buddy, ended up using the case as an example in a presentation he gave about HOA law. He said it was a perfect illustration of how boards can expose themselves to liability when they make arbitrary rules without considering the practical implications. He also said I handled it exactly right by getting everything in writing and documenting everything that happened. I told him I was not trying to build a legal case. I was just trying to cover my ass. He said sometimes those are the same thing. The family with the diabetic daughter sent me a thank you card after the trial. They said they did not blame me for not plowing, and they were grateful that I had stood up to the board. That meant a lot to me. I had worried that people might resent me for leaving them stuck, even though it was not really my fault. But most people understood the position I was in, and they directed their anger where it belonged, at Patricia and her enablers. Looking back, the whole thing could have been avoided so easily. If Patricia had just left well enough alone, if she had not decided that her aesthetic preferences were more important than practical necessity, none of it would have happened. People would have continued being able to get out during snowstorms, the board would not have been charged with crimes, and Patricia would not have spent 6 months in jail. But she did decide that, and so here we are. My tractor is sitting in my garage right now, ready for the next big storm. The forecast is calling for snow next week, actually. Nothing too major, maybe 10 or 12 inches, but I will be ready, and so will the neighborhood, because we learned our lesson. Well, most of us did. I ran into Susan Chen's husband a few months ago at the hardware store. He stayed in town even after Susan left. He apologized for what had happened, said Susan had been following Patricia's lead and did not really think through the implications. I told him I appreciated the apology, but it did not change what happened. Actions have consequences, and Susan had to face hers just like Patricia did. He nodded and said he understood. He also mentioned that Susan was working at a real estate office in Billings now, and that she seemed happy to be away from the whole HOA scene. I wished him well and meant it. I do not hold grudges, but I also do not forget. The new board sent out a survey last month asking residents what they wanted to see improved in the neighborhood. Snow removal was not even on the list of concerns, which made me smile. We have got that covered now. The top concerns were things like updating the playground equipment in the common area and organizing more social events. Normal stuff that actually matters to people's quality of life. I am planning to host a neighborhood barbecue this summer, actually. Just a casual thing, burgers and hot dogs, maybe some beers. A chance for people to hang out and enjoy the nice weather. Montana summers are incredible, and after the winters we deal with, we have earned it. I figure I will fire up the grill, invite everyone over, and we can just relax. No drama, no HOA nonsense, just neighbors being neighborly. That is what a community is supposed to be about, in my opinion. People helping each other out, looking out for one another, and not getting bogged down in stupid rules that do not serve any real purpose. My tractor helps people get to work and stay safe during winter storms. That is all it ever was, and that is all it needs to be. The whole experience made me appreciate good neighbors more than ever. Jim and his wife have become close friends. We get together for dinner once a month, and we always end up laughing about the great tractor ban of 2024, as Jim calls it. His wife bakes these incredible cookies, and she always sends me home with extras. That is the kind of HOA president we needed all along. Someone who brings people together instead of driving them apart. I also learned that most people are reasonable and just want to live their lives without unnecessary interference. It was only 3 people on that board causing problems, but they affected everyone. Once they were gone, everything improved dramatically. The meetings are shorter now, more productive. People actually show up because they know their concerns will be heard, not dismissed. Patricia's house sold last year, and a young couple with 2 kids moved in. They are nice people, and they love the neighborhood. The husband actually came over and asked me about the tractor, said he had heard the story from someone at work. I gave him the short version, and he just shook his head and said some people have too much time on their hands. I agreed. Their kids play in the snow every time we get a good storm, building snowmen and having snowball fights. It reminds me why I like this neighborhood in the first place. It is a good place to live with good people, and nobody is trying to make anyone's life harder than it needs to be. I still get Christmas cards from some of the neighbors thanking me for keeping the streets clear. It is a little embarrassing, honestly. I am just doing what needs to be done. But I appreciate the sentiment. It is nice to feel valued instead of harassed for trying to help. The city sent me a letter of commendation last year, recognizing my volunteer snow removal efforts. Apparently, Carl Rodriguez from Emergency Management had recommended me for it. The letter is in a drawer somewhere. I did not frame that one. Helping my neighbors is not about recognition. It is just the right thing to do, Winter is coming again soon. I can feel it in the air. The leaves are changing, and there is already snow on the peaks of the mountains visible from my backyard. I will get the tractor serviced next week. Make sure everything is ready to go. The plow attachment needs a new cutting edge, and I want to change the oil before the cold really sets in. And when that first big storm hits, I will be ready. I will fire up the tractor, clear my driveway, and then head out to do the street. My neighbors will wake up to clear roads, and they will be able to get to work or wherever else they need to go. Nobody will threaten me with fines. Nobody will tell me I am violating some made-up aesthetic rule. I will just do what needs to be done, the way it should have been all along. That is the real ending to this story. Not the trial, not Patricia going to jail, but just getting back to normal. A normal where people are free to help each other without petty tyrants getting in the way. A normal where common sense prevails over arbitrary rules. A normal where a man can use his tractor to clear snow without it becoming a federal case. Well, technically it became a state case, but you get what I mean. I am sitting here now looking out at the mountains, thinking about how strange life can be. A year and a half ago, I was just a guy with a tractor trying to be helpful. Then I became the center of an HOA controversy, then a witness in a criminal trial, and now I am back to being just a guy with a tractor. Except now, everyone knows the story, and I have a framed cease and desist order on my wall. Jim called me yesterday and asked if I wanted to join him for coffee this morning. I said sure. We met at the local place downtown, the one that roasts their own beans. Over coffee, he told me the HOA had received an inquiry from a documentary filmmaker who wanted to do a short film about what happened. Apparently, our story has become an example of HOA reform movements across the country. What did you tell them? I asked. I told them I would ask you first. You are the one who actually dealt with all of it. If you do not want to do it, we will decline. I thought about it for a minute. Part of me just wants to move on and forget the whole thing ever happened. But another part of me thinks maybe sharing the story more widely could help other people dealing with similar situations. If it prevents even one HOA from making the same stupid mistakes Patricia did, maybe it is worth it. Let me think about it, I told Jim. He nodded and changed the subject to the upcoming Thanksgiving plans. His wife wants to host a neighborhood potluck, and they are trying to gauge interest. I told him I would bring my famous smoked turkey. Well, it is not actually famous, but people seem to like it. That is where I am now. Living my life, enjoying my home, helping my neighbors, and occasionally being reminded of the time I let an entire neighborhood get snowed in because the HOA president was on a power trip. It is a good story, I will admit that. And it has a happy ending. The bad guys lost, justice was served, and the community is stronger for it. The sun is setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It is beautiful up here in Montana, especially at this time of year. The air is crisp, the mountains are gorgeous, and I have a warm house and good neighbors. Life is pretty good, all things considered. My tractor is still in the garage waiting. The snow will come soon, probably next month, and when it does, I will be ready. Not because I have to be, not because anyone is making me, but because it is the right thing to do. Because that is what neighbors do for each other in places like this. Patricia tried to take that away with her rules and her threats and her cease and desist order, but she failed. The community is still here, still helping each other, still getting through the harsh winters together. And I am still here with my tractor, ready to do my part. That is the real victory, I think. Not that Patricia went to jail, not that the board was replaced, but that we all learned what really matters. Not perfectly manicured lawns or matching mailboxes or arbitrary rules about acceptable snow removal equipment. What matters is people taking care of each other, especially when times get tough, and in Montana winters, times get tough pretty regularly. But we handle it. We have good equipment, good preparation, and good people. That is all you really need. I think I will say yes to the documentary. Not for me, but for everyone else who has ever dealt with an HOA that forgot what it was supposed to be doing. Maybe our story can help change things, one neighborhood at a time. If nothing else, it might give people a laugh and remind them that standing up to petty tyranny is worth doing, even if it means letting things get worse before they get better. The important thing is that they did get better, and they are better now. And I have no doubt they will stay that way, because we have people in charge now who actually care about the community, instead of just wielding power for its own sake. Tomorrow, I will call Jim and tell him to give the documentary people my number. Tonight, I am just going to enjoy the sunset and the peace and quiet. Winter is coming, but I am ready for it. We all are. And that really is where the story ends. Not with drama or conflict, but with preparation and community, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that sometimes doing the right thing means standing your ground and letting other people learn hard lessons. Patricia learned hers. The community learned theirs. And I learned that I have better neighbors than I ever realized. The tractor sits ready in the garage. The mountains stand tall against the darkening sky. And life goes on, one winter at a time in Willow Creek, Montana. Just the way it should be.